Peace, family. It's me. I'm back. Excuse my appearance. I just got through running through these New Jersey streets, trying to keep my cardio up. And I had this on my mind while I was running. I wanted to get it out while it's fresh. So lately, I've been doing these recaps and recollections on what I learned over the summer from doing the Tantra tour and uh, my time in Detroit during Ramadan and so on and so forth. Right now, I want to get into the subject of Ferguson. Um, when Mike Brown was killed, I was on my way to California for the last leg of the Tantra tour, and I was attempting to stay in Tantra mode and really avoid what was going on in the news, keep my energy up and all that. But my spirit just wouldn't let me turn away completely from what was going on. Now, Mike Brown was killed about 3 miles away from the house that I grew up in St. Louis. He walked the same streets as me, probably had problems with some of the same cop as I did, and my spirit really connected me to that situation in a way that I eventually had to go and see what I could do to help. Before I went home to St. Louis, while I was still in Cali, people were asking me, like, did I feel afraid for myself or for my sons as black men? And this is these heightened instances of police brutality. And I guess I surprised some people with my answer because, no, I'm not afraid for me or my boys, because, things generally don't happen to me in my life that I don't want to happen. I have had some success in applying these spiritual principles that I deal with all the time to where, I pretty much get what I want out of life. Life gives me what I expect to get. And I expect happiness. I expect bliss. I am the bliss coach. That's what I do. So, I don't have the same negative experiences that I used to have. And I teach my boys the same principles. But lately, I have started to feel a bit of survivor's guilt. Survivor's guilt is a situation where you're in a traumatic situation with some other people and you survive and they don't. And then you feel guilty about being the one that made it. It's one of the symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And I got some of that going on. Like I feel like a lot of people that I grew up with, people that I love dearly, are dealing with some major issues in life that I know I now have the skills to handle that I didn't used to have. And I kind of feel a little bit, tad bit guilty about being blissed out all the time while my people are suffering. So now I'm really understanding the responsibility that I have, to whom much is given, much is expected. So my newfound happiness requires me to do what I can to meet my people where they are and share my skills with them for how to achieve happiness in life. So, all that being said, got to St. Louis, immediately went to work trying to figure out who was doing what on the ground, who were the local movers and shakers, who were really the organizers behind the Justice for Mike Brown movement. And like literally around the corner from where I grew up, there was a group of people that organically formed out of they were using the church as a safe space. And all kind of meetings going on there all day, every day, trainings. I was pleasantly surprised to see so many activists from around the country show up to lend their help to the situation. I had never really seen anything like that before in my years of being an activist. Also pleasantly surprised to see so many first-time people from the community, people who never really been into politics or activism, coming out and lending their efforts every day to the movement. And also a bit saddened but not surprised that there was so much focus on electoral politics people saying that, you know, we wouldn't have this relationship with the police that we have if we voted more. Mike wouldn't have got killed somehow if we voted more. I disagree with that stance. And I've thought about this quite a bit. There are other communities, ethnic communities in the United States, especially those from Asia, Chinese, Korean, Indian, Arab, Persian. None of them vote in significant numbers. They don't feel it necessary to achieve what they want to get out of the system called America. And, I can tell you from experience dealing with police officers that they definitely don't particularly like Asian people, especially Arabs. But they don't go around shooting them all willy-nilly like they do us. So what is the difference between these communities and the community I come from, Africans in America, the children of slaves? The fundamental difference is the level of respect that those communities command by their own respect for self. They have cultural habits that allow them to command respect in ways that my people don't. They look at themselves as common groups from a common landmass, with a common history, a common culture, a common language. They view each other as family, and they conduct themselves as such. They come over here, they find a niche for their community, a certain industry they can get into. They hire each other, they show each other how to open businesses, they put each other's kids through school. We don't have those cultural habits. This is one of the most unfortunate side effects of our history of being slaves in this unique American-style slavery that we went through for 300 years. Those cultural habits dealing with economics and entrepreneurship were taken away from us and never restored for us after we were so-called emancipated. And we are still very much dealing with that right now, 150 years removed from physical slavery. We have this current strategy that we're dealing with of protest, demonstration, boycott. We've been here before. We've been doing this same basic blueprint for the past 60 years, attempting to get the freedoms and the rights from the United States that were promised to us as citizens. And I think it's time for us to begin to learn a bit of lessons from this past 60 years of history. That yes, these things can be effective. They have been used to gain some legislative victories and some victories to the courts. However, these gains are not permanent. There is no promise that these gains are going to last. We saw in the 90s the beginning of the repeal of affirmative action and things along those lines that we fought so hard to achieve in the 60s. And, it's time for us to really begin to ask ourselves the questions of how do we make sure that our gains are permanent? How do we make sure that the things we achieve cannot be taken away in the future? I believe that the only way we can guarantee that our gains are permanent is for us to make sure that the things we achieve are not given to us by anyone else. I believe that any program for us dealing with our freedom and justice and equality could not be primarily based on asking our open enemies for anything. We have to give our freedoms back to ourselves. We have to take these things, all the things that were stolen from us during slavery, we had to give them back to ourselves. I believe that we have to really begin to function from the perspective of, if there was nobody else in America tomorrow but us, the 40 million children of slaves in this country, if there was no one here but us, how would we feed ourselves? How would we clothe ourselves? How would we shelter ourselves? How would we educate ourselves? How would we employ ourselves? How would we protect ourselves? When we function from that perspective, then we have to, really pool our resources and really begin to look at each other as family and see how we can pull together, get our Harambe on, and do for self. Because as Ferguson is showing us as the days go past, I don't know how many people are still paying attention to the situation on the ground in Ferguson, but the demonstrations and the protests have not stopped at all. But every day we're getting more and more indications from the elected officials and from the so-called majority community that they really have no desire at all to do right by us, for the sake of doing right. They don't have that in them to do for us. We have to do right by ourselves. We have to take it upon ourselves to empower our own community, to empower ourselves so that we can command the same respect that other ethnic communities command. Another term for that would be Black Power. That doesn't mean that we are against anyone else, that we hate anyone. It simply means that we are recognizing our current position with a lack of power, and that we are turning our focus inward to reclaim our power. So, that's all I want to say on that right now. Peace and love. Hands Up United.org is a website for the real organizers in St. Louis and in Ferguson. Do what you can to help out. October 10th through the 13th, everyone is invited to go to Ferguson to continue to apply the pressure there. Black Power. One love.